looked already today at the fact that one of the things we learn about Jesus in this episode with the woman at the well is that Jesus reached across the humanly constructed boundaries that so often separate people. But we learn a few more things about Jesus as well. One of them is simply this, that Jesus regards every moment as an opportunity to impact a life. This was a time in which Jesus was tired, he was in need of refreshment, but that did not prevent him from being engaged in a way that would impact the life of this Samaritan woman. Note, for example, verses 5 and 6 that we read a few moments ago. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about the 6th hour. Jesus is tired. He's worn out. And one of the reasons that he doesn't go into the town is that he's seeking to get some rest. This is a moment of fatigue, but that alone is not going to prevent Jesus from having an impact in the life of this woman. Jesus is eager to seize the opportunity to make a difference in her life, even in a moment of rest, even in a time when he is seeking refreshment. There's an opportunity to share a life-giving word. In fact, Jesus uses that metaphor of life-giving water as exactly the symbol of what he's seeking to do in the life of this woman. This raises the question for us, are we like Jesus in that regard? Do we really look at every moment as an opportunity to have an impact on someone's life? That moment standing in line, that unexpected phone call, that whatever that occasion may be, do we look at it with that in mind? One of the great examples of that came to mind for me as I was giving thought to what that looks like in the ways that we live was that of Diane Stitzer. Some of you may know Diane. She and her husband Don were part of our church family, and her husband was going through an incredible battle with cancer a few years ago, and because of that, Diane often found herself sitting in hospital waiting rooms while Don was being attended to by the nurses, or while she was passing a few hours in the night as he was being treated in his hospital room. Often during that season, Diane was unable to spend the usual amount of time that she was in her counseling practice. But what Diane found was that if she were intentional about those moments, even in the waiting room, she found that God would open the doors for her to be counseling and praying with people and sharing with people about the hope and assurance that God could bring in difficult circumstances, because she was sitting in waiting rooms with people who were walking through some of those same challenges, a loved one with a serious or terminal illness. And if she were willing to look at those as opportunities for her to have an impact in someone else's life, God created plenty of those. And she can share with you some of those great moments that she had to pray with people and to talk with them about their struggles and their loved ones' struggles in the midst of all of that. You and I have plenty of those moments, whether they're moments that we spend with coworkers in a meeting or as a part of our work, whether they're moments that we spend with fellow students in class, in the hallways, during extracurricular hours, during lunch, whatever the case may be. But if we're going to be like Jesus, then we have to consider each of those moments as an opportunity to have an impact in someone else's life, even in the moments perhaps when we're tired, when fatigue has settled in. Even an occasion like needing a drink of water becomes an opportunity to have an impact in someone else's life. Now, one of the other striking things to me that we learn about Jesus in the course of this story is simply the fact that Jesus resists distractions from what really matters. You see, because when Jesus turns the conversation to this woman's life, and things maybe start hitting a little close to home, or maybe they're a little uncomfortable for her, she quickly raises one of those classic arguments between Jew and Samaritan in an effort to divert attention from the issue of her life. She raises the issue of which temple that the Jews and the Samaritans were to worship at. Notice what she says there, beginning in verse 19. "Sir," the woman said, "I can see that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem." Jesus declared, "Believe me, woman, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming, and has now come, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth. You see, this is all a part of that hostility that we were talking about earlier between Jew and Samaritan. There was a disagreement between Jews and Samaritans regarding where the temple was to be built. Some of that disagreement resulted from their understandings of Deuteronomy chapter 27, verses 4 and 5, where the instructions are given there. When you have crossed the Jordan, set up these stones on Mount Ebal, as I command you today, and coat them with plaster, and build there an altar to the Lord your God, an altar of stones. Now in our Bible, as I read a moment ago, we have what is the Jewish version. It comes from what's called the Masoretic text. But the Samaritans believed that instead of Mount Ebal, actually the command was to build the temple on Mount Gerizim, at the base of of that which is the Samaritan city of Shechem. And both sides, the Jews and the Samaritans, accuse each other of altering the text somehow to fit their cause. Now, during the monarchy, while David's temple was built by his son Solomon in the city of Jerusalem, the Samaritans eventually built a temple themselves on Mount Gerizim that became a rival temple to this. Now, that's the temple that was ultimately destroyed by the Jewish governor and high priest John Hyrcanus in 128 BC. But it became, in that time, one of the great kind of flashpoint issues between Jews and Samaritans. So when Jesus turns the conversation to this woman's life, she immediately seeks to distract from that awkward kind of personal, you're getting kind of close, stepping on my toes kind of conversation, to something that will distract. But Jesus is unwilling to let that happen. Jesus, in fact, reminds her not only that the Samaritans had it wrong, but also that at some point it really isn't going to matter because of who he is and what he has done. The gift of forgiveness and salvation that he can bring to her life will supersede or transcend any concern for which temple they will be at. The issue will be how they worship God in spirit, not the particular geographical location of their worship. So Jesus reaches across the boundaries that are here. Jesus regards every moment as an opportunity to have an impact in someone else's life. And Jesus here also resists any effort to distract from the things that really matter. How well are we doing those things? Are we resisting the little things that distract from what is ultimately important? Faith in him and coming to know and to follow him? Are we really regarding everything, that every moment of our lives is that opportunity to have an impact in someone else's life? And are we willing to step out of our comfort zone and to reach across the boundaries that so often separate people? Mark Buchanan, in his book, Your God is Too Safe, tells about the time when he met Paul Yonggi Cho, one of the great pastors in Korea. In fact, he's the pastor of the largest church in the world. Buchanan says several years ago, as Yonggi Cho's ministry was becoming international, Cho told God, I will go anywhere to preach the gospel except Japan. You see, Yonggi Cho hated the Japanese with a gut-deep loathing because of what the Japanese troops had done to the Korean people and to members of Yonggi Cho's own family during World War II. For him, the Japanese were his Ninevites or his Samaritans or whatever category best fits that boundary that we have put up. But he explains that through a combination of a prolonged inner struggle, several direct challenges from others, and finally an urgent and starkly worded invitation, Cho felt that God was calling him to preach in Japan. And so he went, but he went with bitterness. The first speaking engagement was at a pastor's conference there, 1,000 Japanese pastors. Cho stood up to speak, and what came out of his mouth were these words, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. And then he broke down and he wept. Honest words, but brimming with bitterness and hatred. At first one, and then two, and then eventually all 1,000 pastors stood up, and one by one they walked up to Yonggi Cho, knelt at his feet, and asked forgiveness for what they and their people had done to him and to his people. And as this went on, God began to change Yonggi Cho's heart. The Lord began to put a single message in there, and he began to whisper it to each one. I love you. I love you. I love you. If we're going to be like Jesus, then maybe Jesus needs to do a change in our hearts so that we're willing to reach across those boundaries of bitterness, hatred, some of those prejudices that we have that separate us from other people. If we're going to be like Jesus, then maybe it involves using every moment, even those moments when I'm tired and I don't feel like it, to have an impact in the life of someone else. And maybe it's our willingness not to allow the little things, the things that ultimately don't matter, not to become a distraction from what really counts, the things of eternity, and following our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I think that's the challenge that we have today. From an encounter that Jesus had, a very unlikely conversation with a Samaritan woman whose life was changed. And because of it, so were the lives of many of the villagers that she shared life with in that time. Who will come to know that life change? Because you're like Jesus, as he shows us in this story.